trolling Senator Elizabeth Warren as a snake, and in post after post, labeling Mayor Pete Buttigieg a rat. Two victims of this tell CNN they were so afraid of the online attacks they faced, they don't even want us to describe the circumstances for fear it would start up again. They both just questioned the politics of Bernie Sanders in a public setting, and their personal lives were exposed and attacked.
Well, just what Nick said, I think that's right. I mean, there is no Democratic establishment anymore. There's not even a Democratic Party anymore. The Democratic Party is a meaningless notion that the party, like the Republican Party, has been hollowed out and privatized to a large extent. There are Democratic elites, and so when we're talking about the Democratic establishment, we're really talking about a number of a bunch of people that Nick also knows well, which really means Democratic donors.
This is the most important election in the history of our country.
This election is the most important in the modern history of this country.
The election in 2020, without hyperbole, is going to be the most important election this country has undergone in over 100 years. Not a joke.
This November's elections are more important than any I can remember in my lifetime, and that includes when I was on the ballot.
There are just 8 days left in what is the most important election of our lifetime.
Where did you guys come to a conclusion about why Clinton had such a hard time just owning that she did something wrong with the email server?
You know, I know that Russia and other forces would love us to have a debate. This is exactly what they want. They want us to have a debate about the internal structure of Hillary's campaign, what's true, what's not true. And I'm just not going to play that. I'm sorry.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It's like we had entire training courses. It reminds you of the glory of the American experiment.
You know, people have said, if you look at, for example, the heat that ended up around the bend the knee of Colin Kaepernick. Mm-hmm. Many smart people have said it actually was not a threat. The Russian bots started taking out. Really? Yes.
But I saw my mom. My mom is the strongest woman I know.
She should
this
be
is
running.
Not about.
If you're like me, one of the millions suffering from pain caused by migraine, Nurtec ODT may help. It's the only medication that can treat a migraine when it strikes and prevent migraine attacks.
Trump and the Republicans lose on Tuesday, and if they lose badly, it's not going to be because of the left, whatever that means. It's not because the 50 Antifa black mask guys who roam around the United States breaking windows and committing mayhem, most of whom are probably paid police informers.
Most of whom are probably paid police informers.
Rudy Giuliani, there's only three things he mentioned in a sentence: a noun and a verb and 9/11. I mean,
I'm going to try to get through this. Thank you for what you did 3 years ago today.
And I went to Wall Street in December of 2007, before the big crash that we had, and I basically said, cut it out.
and now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. If we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden.
This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever.
He is sharp, intensely probing, and detail-oriented and focused.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country.
I can't do it.
We'll do it live. Okay. We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. And thing sucks.
In 5, 4, 3.
Citizens of the internet, I'm back again, and as you can see, a little clean shaven, looking dapper, a little younger. Not really, but I figured it's the summertime, starting to warm up. Got to trim that down a little bit. Maybe grow in some of those gray patches just a little bit. Let me make absolutely sure that my mic is on and functional today, because I made the mistake before of getting things started without, really doing anything of value there. And let me just make sure that I sent myself. Oh, it's like I might not have opened the correct file today. But welcome to another week of bread and circuses, another week of good times and noodle salad. And I say that off the top of my head. When I thought of that this morning, I thought good times noodle salad. People have no idea what I'm talking about when I say that. So I'm going to show you.
Some of us have great stories, pretty stories that take place at lakes with both.
So this is from a movie that's called As Good as It Gets, with Jack Nicholson and some other people. And he just has this line about noodle salad that I had to share with you. So let me see if I can just get it right up here. Listen to this.
Good times, noodle salad. What makes... That's their story. Good times, noodle salad. What makes...
Yeah, so that's kind of the point here, I guess. Hold on.
No one in this car, but a lot of people. That's their story. Good times, noodle salad.
So the whole point of the clip, just to give you some context, is that, these people are coming to terms with their trauma, that all that liberal shit, coming to terms with their trauma. And so, Jack Nicholson has to jump in and say, you guys' story might be one of tragedy, but that's not everyone's story. And he says, here, let me start this over. He says,
some of us have great stories.
Some of us have great stories. And then
story. Good times, noodle salad.
So you get the idea. That's where the good times noodle salad reference comes from Jack Nicholson in the movie As Good as It Gets. But here we are in America. We have a president that a lot of people voted for out of sheer desperation. Just because they already knew what voting for Kamala Harris looked like. A lot of people want to blame, the left or whatever, people who didn't sexism, racism for not voting for Kamala Harris. But the reality is a lot of people already knew what a Kamala Harris presidency was going to look like because she was the vice president already. I tried so hard and got so far. That was the wrong clip.
I want to talk to you. Okay, I come first.
Okay, sorry. Anyway, everybody knew what a Kamala Harris presidency was going to look like, and it wouldn't have changed a thing. Just like voting for Boyden. Just like voting for Boyden. Just like voting for Boyden. Sorry about it. Just like voting for Biden and Obama changed nothing. So Trump was a wild card. Everybody knew he was a con man. Okay. Maybe there's a few people that didn't know. that believe what he said. But liberals want to pretend that all Trump supporters are just morons who didn't know any better when they're not. And I always tell this story, but I'm not going to tell the full story now. I'll just tell you the cliff notes. The story ends with this line. He's not a Bush or a Clinton. Right? Does that make sense to you? Do you understand that? Because when someone said that to me, I went, oh, okay. Now Trump makes sense to me, because I didn't like Trump, and I have to be honest, I voted for Hillary Clinton, which was also a big mistake. I'm not proud of it, but it happened. A lot of people, we're going to get into this a little bit later. A lot of people from the Bernie movement got kind of railroaded into the Hillary Clinton vote. But I digress. The point, again, is that people voted for Trump because he wasn't a Bush or a Clinton. And that's why a lot of people voted for him. And it's not because they're racists or whatever, and I think a lot of people are noticing that it doesn't matter who you vote for, even in the case of Donald Trump now. It doesn't matter if you're on the left or you're on the right. None of it matters, because you get the same goddamn thing every time. And someone needs to explain this to Norm Finkelstein, but I'll get into Norm Finkelstein in a little while. I'm getting ahead of myself. But let's get started today, because we have a card about national apathy and the way things are shaking out in the world. And we definitely have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The show is jam-packed with a bunch of stuff, more segments than usual, so buckle up. But let's start with our war with Iran, the war that no one wanted in Iran. And I mentioned, the Trump administration came into power basically on a platform of no new wars. And, you could say what you want about that. You could say, based on his first term, no one should have believed that. Fine. We already went over this, the con man thing, because every politician is a con man. So, regardless of who you vote for, you're going to get a con man. So at least with Trump, he was kind of a wild card. And that is why, again, I do not fault the people who voted for him. I didn't vote for him in this last cycle. I didn't vote for anyone. But I don't fault the people who did. And I don't think that it's productive to attack or demean those people who did, especially the ones who are now coming around and going, hey, guess what? I was wrong about that. I was wrong about it. A lot of the conservatives are a lot more honest, in my view, than the liberal people who voted for Biden. Who the conservatives, at least, the Tucker Carlsons of the world, or the Candace Owens, are coming out and saying, fuck Donald Trump. Like, I voted for him, and I think he's doing a terrible job. He's gone back on every goddamn thing that he said when he was running. But as I mentioned, Trump didn't get elected because of the right, or because of a vast conspiracy, or because of racism. A lot of people took a chance on him because when he ran for office, this, my friends, is how it looked. Let me just remind you how Trump looked on the goddamn campaign trail.
To be the first president in decades who started no new wars. That's very good. No new wars. Instead, I brought our troops back home. No new wars.
As Donald Trump campaigned for his second term, a promise.
No new wars. They said his personality will create wars. I said, no, my personality is going to keep us out of wars. Look at him, listen to him. He's
See, and he even said stuff. Remember when he said something like right at the end of the campaign about Liz Cheney having guns pointed at her and people lost their mind? The press lost their mind. So it was kind of believable. And I love that this is from PBS Frontline. They have this spooky music and like, oh, it was a secret conspiracy to trick the voters.
going to start a war. Listen to his rhetoric. They thought I was going to start a war. Let me tell you something. I'm going to stop World War III.
And at his inauguration, he vowed to keep his promise.
We will measure our success not only by the battles we win, but also by the wars that we end, and perhaps most importantly, the wars we never get into.
There you go. I think Tulsi Gabbard said that.
My proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker and unifier. That's what I want to be, a peacemaker and a unifier.
Inside the White House.
So there you go. That's how Donald Trump looked when he was running. So, a lot of people will say, oh, we all knew he was a liar because you dumb MAGAs. And I say to those people, all fucking politicians are con men. Kamala Harris is as big of a con person, con woman, con whatever the fuck. I don't want to misgender Kamala Harris, but she's as big of a fucking con as Donald Trump is. The difference is her career was in politics. His career was conning people, in the real estate business world, whatever you want to, reality entertainment, whatever. So stop acting, like you have some kind of moral high ground that's, AOC is like, we work with Marjorie Taylor Greene because of anti-Semitism. Shut the fuck up, AOC. Don't act like you have moral high ground over people who were desperate enough to vote for Donald Trump. A lot of the same people who voted for Obama voted for Trump. Are those guys drooling, racist, MAGA KKK members? No, use your fucking brain. And this is how I feel like I have to talk to liberals, because they still think they're the smart ones in the American political equation. Anyway, this was Trump's stupid ass last year when he went to war with Iran. Iran's nuclear facilities have been obliterated and suggestions otherwise. Fake news. Fake news.
I've never seen anything like it.
Well, unfortunately for America, the Iran war is still going. And quick update on that. Some U.S. jets were shot down. Now, this is alleged. I'm not sure if the U.S. media is reporting this yet. But give them a couple weeks. Wait till they get the okay from their overlords to talk about this, and then you'll probably hear it on CNN or whatever in 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month. This is why we must censor the internet ASAP, folks, because we got to do it for the children, to protect the children. The children, we gotta protect the children from Russians.
Russia.
Did it? No.
Okay, anyway, I'm sorry. But to keep going here. Sorry, not sorry. Bloomberg. So this is what they are allowed to report on the current state of things in the Sarah Palin, the mainstream media. Remember when Sarah Palin was a thing? She's like, the mainstream media. Oh my God, you guys. An Iranian ballistic missile strike on Kuwait air base within the past 24 hours caused minor injuries to several Americans and seriously damaged 2 MQ Reaper strike drones. I love how they try to make this sound as, benign as possible. They're just like, yeah, it was within the past 24 hours, minor injuries. It's a pretty safe bet where I'm coming from, where I'm sitting here, that injuries includes dead, allegedly. My theory is that they're hiding a lot of the casualties related to this war in order to prevent massive outrage against the war that's already very unpopular with Americans. And the press, as we know, does a very good job at just not talking about this stuff until it's too late for the public to really care about it or do anything. So this will come out, this story again is kind of, oh, you guys, a couple drones, minor injuries, you know how it is, just a flesh wound. I didn't prepare with that Monty Python clip for the flesh wound joke there, but you've seen the joke where the guy lops the knight's arm off and it's spraying blood, and he's like, "It's but a flesh wound," and then he eventually chops the guy down to just the guy's just like a torso on the ground biting at him. He's like, "Come back, I'll bite your legs off." Like, that's the USA right now. Laundry room fire, guys. Our aircraft carrier experienced a very terrible laundry room fire, in case you are wondering. So this again is what they are allowed to report on. I don't know how this got in here, but this slipped into the mix somehow. And of course the rationale behind the war is right here. And later on I'm going to attempt to explain this to our good friend Norm Finkelstein, who, despite a long career of being correct, is starting to blank out a little bit in his old age. Anyway, here's what is in the pipeline, people. Going back to my thumbnail, this is what I believe is coming. And I drive an electric car. So this is, gas prices aren't going to affect me directly, but guaranteed groceries and everything else are going to go up, shoot through the roof when, the government can't subsidize the cost of oil anymore and gas creeps up to $8-10 a gallon. How bad will that get? It makes me wonder. Anyway, let's read this real quick. I wanted to show you this. ExxonMobil exec. So this guy, Robert Pape, is, I guess, a well-respected professor. I'm not going to comment on his credentials, but he posted this and he said, everyone should read what Senior Vice President of Exxon, Neil Chapman, says about the oil price surge coming in 2 to 3 weeks. The next wave of the energy shock is approaching fast. Now, let's read it. Commercial inventories of crude oil, liquids, think petroleum, gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, they've all run down, and running down those inventories has been mitigated or offset, supplemented by the release of strategic petroleum reserves, which most of the Western countries have done. All of that has mitigated the impact. You can model this. We've modeled it. I think a lot of people in the industry have modeled it. We're approaching unheard of inventory levels. I mean, literally really low levels. You can debate whether that's going to hit those really low levels in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Once you get to that point, then you'll see the price shoot up. I mean, I think dated Brent, this is probably reference to something else in the article, but most people, a model would say dated Brent will shoot up. Once you get to that really low inventory level, up to $150, $160, the models would tell you that. And then what happens when the price gets to a certain level? Demand destruction brings it back into balance. Prices go so high, it becomes unaffordable. And that's what happens. And so we're at that level right now. And I think crude being in this sort of 90 to 110, now this is the key part right here, $90 to $110 range for the last, whatever it is, 6 weeks, has really been mitigated by running down inventories. It can't last forever. So we'll see what happens. And predicting this and the exact timing, it's always a challenge, but that's the way we see the picture. Now, the Trump administration, I think, keeps hoping that they're going to be able to bomb open the Strait of Hormuz. But until they settle this thing with Iran, the strait is not going to open. And there's also, there was a lot of cope in the comments under this post. But the guy says pretty clearly he thinks the price of oil for the past couple months was mitigated by running down inventories. He then says it can't last forever, so we'll see what happens. But they've run models on this, and they see bad shit on the horizon. Maybe that's why Peter Thiel just bailed for Argentina. I guess we'll find out. So I, in preparation for this show today, put together a bunch of stories, and then at the last minute, I kind of mixed them all up. So let me get to this next story here. I got to kind of set it up for you before I get going. Now, we've got a lot of wars going on, so it's kind of hard to pay attention to all of them at once. And I think in some cases, in most cases, it's troubling because what resources does the United States really have left? When we're sending all these weapons to, help Ukraine battle Russia, we're, sending all these weapons to the Middle East for Israel and all this stuff. And let me just take a quick sidebar and give a shout out to my boy, Truth Violates Community Guidelines. Thank you for coming on. People are going to start. What do you mean by CBDC? People are going to starve to death. The government will offer CBDC. Does that mean like universal basic income? Is that an acronym for that I'm unaware of, Truth? I think COVID was kind of maybe a trial run for this. I have a couple different theories too on why this is being allowed to happen. And I think one of them is it kind of forces the US to kind of invest more in green energy. So that could be part of it. That's part of my conspiracy theory brain. Because if you look at China, a lot of what the U.S. is trying to do on the world stage before we move into this next segment about Russia, a lot of what I think the U.S. is trying to do on the world stage right now. Oh, okay. Okay, I see what you're talking about. Central bank digital currency. Got you. Yeah, I mean, definitely. And also, it looks like what the U.S. is trying to do on the world stage, to continue on my point about the renewables and electric cars and all that. And maybe there is an agenda behind the electric cars where everything's trackable and all that too. I think, I don't want to get too off the rails here, but my point being is I think that the U.S. has been trying to block China, right, from having access to oil. But I think China's already kind of built an economy that isn't completely doesn't completely rely on oil. If you've seen kind of the way that they've built their freeways, their EVs are insane. Their new EVs, we may get into that a little bit later on. But I do think that like this kind of like oil shortage may force the market to adjust more to renewable energies, kind of in the same way that COVID kind of forced a lot of people to start doing meetings on Zoom and like telecommuting, if that makes sense. But that's just my theory. And I don't disagree with you with the central bank digital currency, CBDC thing. I do think that any opportunity that these people have to kind of push this, as we saw with COVID and 9/11 and all these kind of tragic events, allegedly, we saw these pushes to kind of vastly change the general paradigm of people. COVID, such a good example and I don't even think all the stuff that came out of COVID was necessarily bad. I'm probably doing this as a result of COVID, but again, these kind of catalyzing events, as you would call them, change the game. So let's talk about Russia, because Putin is a guy who, throughout my youth, I was kind of trained to hate just Russia in general. Just from the time I was a kid, I can remember just being kind of mentally trained that Russia is bad, commies are bad. Throughout movies like The Russians Are Coming, it was kind of like the Redcoats, Paul Revere and the Redcoats. The Redcoats are coming, the Redcoats are coming. When I was a kid in the 80s, the Russians are coming. There was a movie I remember really well called Ruskies, about these little kids who find the secret Russian spy ring and shit. And then there's Rocky IV, and Later on, it became Middle Eastern terrorists or the bad. Like you have like True Lies came out later on with Schwarzenegger. There was like the Middle Eastern guys are the bad guys, and then they kind of started to warp the American mind towards other enemies to push wars on. But Putin, over time, the more I look at him, the more I respect the guy as someone who has control of a country and has kind of brought a country back from the edge in a way that very few people have. And is he ruthless? Does he do illegal shit? I'm sure he does. I mean, you have to be to maintain political power in some of these positions. However, when you look at these countries, China and Russia, the big differentiator between a government like Russia's or a government like China's in the US is that they punish white-collar criminals. They don't make them a part of the government. They punish them, sometimes with the death penalty. So there's a big difference in the way. That's why communism is so demonized, or whatever, in the United States. Not even that Russia's economy is entirely communist or China's. They really aren't. Like, they're communist to a degree, in the sense that the proletariat rules the dictatorship of the proletariat, if you will. And all you have to do. It's funny because quick sidebar here. As someone who grew up in the 80s, the Reagan, the conservative era, the Bush, George W. Bush, it's kind of like there's always been this like trickle down thing where people are like, oh, if you just keep giving money to rich people, like it's going to trickle down to the economy. Well, we've had 50 plus years of that now. And now we have real material examples of economics at play, right? Look at the economics of China of the last 50 years. And what that resulted in economically for them versus the economic deregulation and kind of libertization of the U.S. economy on behalf of wealthy elites, to the point where the Supreme Court says money is speech and you can vote with zillions of dollars, like, as if that makes any sense. What that basically does is give rich people more ability to speak in elections than an average person. It's totally corrupt and backwards and completely asinine. But that's how bad and how corrupt the United States is, that entire court has been corrupted to that level, And so you see, with these countries like Russia and China, sure, there's pockets of corruption, and I'm sure that there, I'm not saying that Putin is some saint or whatever, but the reason that he's so vilified, that people like him and Kim are so vilified to the rest of the world, is they're actually giving the country what it wants on the whole. And the result, the proof is in the pudding. If you look at someone like, Xi in China, for example, or even North Korea, I've never been to North Korea. I'm sure there's a reason that it's blocked off. And some people argue, I'll look at the economy of North Korea. I've heard rumors to the contrary that North Korea is very clean and well managed, and it's a very nice country. And same with Russia. We've been told, again, this propaganda our whole lives about how terrible it is. And, then you kind of, thanks to the internet now, this Pandora's box, you have access to Russian propaganda or, an alternative viewpoint. The truth is usually somewhere in the middle. But at least the entire narrative isn't controlled anymore by the powers that be in the United States, thanks to the internet. So you can see different points of views, even though they're trying desperately to prevent that. And so recently, you had this story that Russia struck Romania with a drone out of nowhere. Of course, this comes right after Zelensky's been out begging for money from the EU and the US to keep his war in Ukraine going. But given the kind of retrospective I just gave you there on American propaganda against Russia, I don't buy it at all. I don't take anything at face value. I think there's a vested interest to propagandize against Russia when, I'm not trying to move to Russia. I'm not saying Russia is the greatest thing in the world, but what I am saying is we've been lied to on a scale that is beyond our comprehension in order to push this kind of bullshit, to sell weapons, to, create this demon that we have to arm against, right? So it's reported that Russia hit Romania with a drone strike for no reason. I mean, like, what? Why would they do that? Russia, you wascally wascals. America's like Elmer Fudd, and Russia's like Bugs Bunny, like, you wascally wabbit, why would you shoot a drone at Romania? What did they do? They didn't do anything. It's almost like, You want to draw NATO into the war against you, don't you, you wascally wabbit Putin? This is a complete nonsense. But let's break it down. So this is the kind of initial reporting. A Russian drone has struck a small city across the Ukrainian border. Imagine that. Romania is right next to Ukraine too. Interesting. NATO has issued a strongly worded statement on social media. It caused 0 casualties. And Zelensky urged a world war against Russia as a response. Russia has not reacted currently. So that was the initial story. And, of course, no one with any kind of mental capacity was buying this. This is the first kind of tweet that I picked up. I 100% don't believe Putin bombarded Romania. IMO, it's either Zelensky or Mossad, and it's either Ukraine being tired of fighting alone or they want a world war, given that NATO refused military involvement in Iran. I think this girl is kind of nailing it. But let's keep going. Then we have Garland Nixon. MI6 false flag drone attacks on Romania. NATO's getting desperate. Exactly. Given the history of the Nord Stream pipeline and the things that they've been doing, who would take any of this seriously? And to hammer that point home, here's Olga Bezova, noted Russian propagandist, allegedly. Isn't it amazing how Europe figured out it was a Russian drone that crashed in Romania within a few hours, but they still can't figure out who blew up the Nord Streams 4 years later. And this guy's going, thank it. This was the guy who thanked the USA when the Nord Stream pipeline was busted. Probably because he's going to get energy kickbacks now. It's interesting, too, that Europe is allowing themselves to be kind of subjugated by the U.S. like this, isn't it? It kind of, I think, goes to show, I made this point a couple weeks ago, maybe last week on my show, about the nature of the weapons industry and how until there's not a profit, until like the weapons industry is nationalized or something like that, this will never end because there's a profit motive behind endless war. And, don't even get me started on the corruption of the United States war state and the reason that the prices we pay for weapons are so insanely inflated because it's a Ponzi scam where everyone's taking a cut. And, anyway, let me keep going here. The point being is the idea that Russia just randomly shot off a round against Romania is ridiculous. They have been very careful and concise to the point where throughout this war, to the point where people are calling them weak. They're taking kindness for weakness. And I think, as I kind of alluded to a little bit earlier, what Putin has very carefully been doing is making sure that he doesn't give NATO a reason to fully engage in this war. Kind of managing it carefully without fully, he's also not even with the recent Oreshnik strikes, they didn't kill very many civilians. And that was in response to the Ukraine actually killing a bunch of Russian civilians with drone strikes. And this is all verifiable news. So I'm not saying anything off, out of line or Russian propagandist here. But in addition to this, you have Trump basically just outright admitting that the USA busted the Nord Stream pipeline. Here, watch this. This is great.
Put more pressure on Putin to end the war by imposing new sanctions on Russia and also on China.
Well, remember, I'm the one that ended Nord Stream 2, going to a place called Germany, come to think of it. I'm sorry I did that. But I ended Nord Stream 2. Nobody else did. And then when Biden came in, he immediately approved it. That's essentially the largest pipeline in the world, going to Germany and other countries. And by the way, we have so much oil and gas.
So he's not admitting that they blew it up because it was blown up during the Biden administration? by drunk Ukrainians, allegedly. Positive that the U.S. had nothing to do with that. Wink, wink. But as the poster is admitting here, Angelo, he destroyed the German economy, and he's saying it right in front of the German chancellor, and the guy's just like, yeah, you did it. While at the same time, Trump is assuring Germany there's plenty of oil and energy in the U.S. that Germany can buy.
You will not be able to buy it all. I mean, you literally, we have so much, and I hope we're going to make that a part of our trade deal because we have more than anybody else. We have actually the most by far in the world, probably double what anyone else has. So we'll work on that. I'm sure that's something we'll discuss today.
So the German economy was being buoyed by cheap Russian energy. And then the U.S. rolls up, starts a war in Ukraine, busts all the pipelines and goes, hey, buy it from us now. And this is why you can see behind the scenes, you see this like irrational dick piggery of people like Callis and Merce, BlackRock Merce, as the Duran guys call him, because he's getting some kind of kickbacks on the back. Like allegedly he's getting some kind of kickbacks to keep this war going. All of them are. That's why they're acting so irrational. This is, again, none of this is to continue this war is not in Europe's best interests. Their economies were humming along fine and growing with cheap Russian energy coming through those pipelines. And then the USA comes in and is like, fuck you. We're going to buy our energy. We're the new energy guys in town. And Europe just bent over and spread their cheeks and was like, come on in and fuck us hard, USA. Sodomize the shit out of us. And we'll scream Slava Ukraine while you do it. It's I know that's kind of a sick analogy, but that's the reality of what's going on here. It's very sad that Europe's allowing themselves to be basically domineered, economically by the United States like this. And I mean, we'll see how it works out, but it doesn't look like it's going to work out too good in the end. So here is your boy, Mike Pompeo, advocating for continuing the war in Eastern Europe. Just as we must win in Ukraine or in Iran, we cannot allow Russia to claim victory in Ukraine. My latest for ACLU. So you have guys like this. My response to Mike Pompeo would be, you send your children then to fight, because Ukraine's starting to run low on, able-bodied men at this point, thanks to U.S. war piggery. And also, we voted you out, Mike Pompeo. This is the problem with U.S. fucking politics. No one cares what Mike Pompeo thinks. Why is he still in the debate? Why is he, this is my fucking piece that my think piece about why I'm a fucking dick pig who should still be paid attention to after I've been wrong about every fucking thing. Every U.S. policy decision I've backed has been incorrect, but somehow you're still supposed to listen to these fucking pigs like Mike Pompeo, who I have at the beginning of this, going, I'll lie and cheat for a living. That's what I do. It's the American experience. I'm a fucking lying, cheating piece of shit. That's what I do for a living. I'm Mike Pompeo. And, get the fuck out of here, Mike Pompeo. Jesus Christ. Anyway, here's some Russian propaganda for you from RT. Putin on Romania. And Putin basically just kind of like points out the obvious. And again, it's this guy has like slowly earned my respect, is just like putting up with these. Let's be honest. The intellect of a man like Mike Pompeo is very, very low IQ. That guy is not a smart guy. He's a guy who sucked the right dicks to get to the right places and said the right things. He kissed the right walls, so to speak. You want to put it that way. But Putin basically calls out their bullshit, and it would be stupid for him to hit Romania, first of all, and draw NATO into the conflict. And that's why Russia's been so careful, like I mentioned. But he also points out how this has happened before, and they said that Russia shot, who did they shoot before? Was it Poland or something like that? And then they found out that it was Ukraine. But recently, one of the architects of the Ukraine project, Victoria Nuland, who we all know and love, got a chance to get on stage and debate John Mearsheimer on the origins of the war. And this is one of the rare cases where, like Mike Pompeo, I like to see Mike Pompeo out in the world defending his positions because he looks like, the piece of shit that he is on stage doing that. So I definitely support, people like Victoria Nuland and Mike Pompeo being public figures in this type of a context. But let me show you what I mean here. So this is a debate where Mearsheimer and I forget his partner's name, but they both wrote a book called The Lobby about the Israel lobby. But they debated Pompeo and Nuland recently in a Monk debate, and I've yet to find the full video. I don't think they put it out for obvious reasons when you see the clips, but CIA probably made him sit on it. But listen to this. This is Victoria Nuland defending herself from conspiracy theorists.
So I think this war was principally the fault of the United States. I don't deny for 1 second that Putin was responsible for actually invading Ukraine, but I do think
Into the audience
it was
clapping.
precipitated by NATO expansion.
Is Putin today a monster, both at home and in Ukraine?
No.
He is not.
No.
Do you condemn Hamas? That's essentially what she's doing here. Do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn Putin?
He is not. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. There
See,
you go.
that guy is a.
Look,
Do you think Satan is bad? And then you go, well, it's nuanced. Oh, see, this guy loves Satan. It's the typical scoundrel.
You had a debate on NATO enlargement in 22. You had a debate on Ukraine in 22. I will not reprise that. These guys have actually accused me of toppling the Yanukovych regime. It's direct Russian talking points that they use when they do that. NATO, and I served there twice, including as U.S. ambassador, is a defensive
Direct Russian
alliance.
talking
It does
points.
not come for you if you don't come for it.
Russia.
And when we enlarge,
Russia.
no. And when we began enlarging NATO in 97, we invited the Russians into a partnership with NATO. We did it twice, including seating them around the table.
Look
And
at the way
Russians
she's
were
shaking
not
too.
able to
Maybe it's
use
actually
that
it's probably the
format
camera.
as the
My bad.
primary security format in Europe.
It looked like she was shaking. Okay, so she's kind of denying that that it was her fault that the Ukraine war happened, right? But here is a throwback to Victoria Nuland. And I just want you to see where she stood on this back in the day, because it's important. So here she is in 2016, bragging to the U.S. Congress about how thoroughly Washington had taken over Ukraine after the 2014 coup. She spelled it all out without shame. U.S. operatives embedded into a dozen Ukrainian ministries, American trained cops patrolling 18 cities, the U.S. Treasury gutting 60 Ukrainian banks while sparing depositors to keep people quiet. Hundreds of millions of dollars funneled into molding Ukraine's military. This was an assistance. It was a takeover dressed as aid, unprovoked. So the U.S. essentially created this complete vassal state. Like basically it would be like the 51st state right next door to Russia for this kind of, regime change with gameplay. Listen to this.
And U.S. advisors serve in almost a dozen Ukrainian ministries and localities, helping to deliver services, eliminate fraud and abuse, improve tax collection, and modernize Ukrainian institutions. With U.S. help, newly vetted and trained police officers are patrolling the streets of 18 Ukrainian cities. In courtrooms across Ukraine, free legal aid attorneys funded by the U.S. have won 2/3 of all the acquittals in the countries. Treasury and State Department advisors have helped Ukraine shutter over 60 failed banks and protected the assets of depositors. And since there can be no reform in Ukraine without security, over $266 million of our support has been in the security sector, training 1,200 soldiers and 750 Ukrainian National Guard personnel, and supplying life-saving gear. In FY16, we are continuing that training and equipment of more of Ukraine's border guards, military, and Coast Guard. And U.S. advisors serve in.
So there you go. Now we're going to get into who that guard is in few minutes in a little more detail, but I want to show you one more piece of evidence here, actually, before we move on, of Nuland's involvement in the overthrow of the Ukrainian government. This is the infamous leaked phone call between Victoria Nuland and Jeff Pyatt as the U.S. planned the coup. And I'm not going to play the whole thing because it's about 4 minutes long, but I want you to hear just kind of some of the comments that young Victoria Nuland's making here.
Especially the announcement, he said what he said in response.
Good. So I don't think Cleach should go into the government. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you think what in terms of him not going into the government, just let him sort of stay out and do his.
So what they're talking about is Klitschko, who's a popular Ukrainian, I think, boxer. They wanted to install him as the president, and Nuland was against that. She doesn't want him as the president.
Political homework and stuff. I'm just thinking.
I don't think he'll
in terms of sort of the process moving ahead. We want to keep the moderate Democrats together. The problem is going to be Tony Book and his guys. And, I'm sure that's part of what Yanukovych is calculating on all of this.
I think Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, what he needs is Cleach and Tony Book on the outside. He needs to be talking to them 4 times a week. I just think Cleach going in, he's going to be at that level working for Yatsenyuk. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, no, I think that's right.
So Yatsenyuk, I believe, was the interim president after the coup until Zelensky was democratically elected, and of course.
Right. Okay. Good. Well, do you want us to try to set up a call with him?
So anyway, I show you this evidence just to remind you that Victoria Nuland is far from innocent in the situation in Ukraine. But amidst all this, there are some good political takes happening amidst the Ukraine kind of nonsense. And this happens to be one of them. This is Rep. Anna Paulina Luna. I don't always agree with her, but I'll give her propers I'll give her flowers when she deserves them. And in this case, she deserves them. She says, "You're holding up the peace deal, Voldemar. It's time to accept it." Now, this is in response to him sending a letter. Like, this is what he basically started begging for weapons this week. He went to Sweden, the US, the UK. So he says, "This week I prepared a special letter addressed to the President of the United States and Congress. Yesterday, the letter was officially delivered to the institutions in Washington. This is quite rare for the leader of another state to address both the President and the Congress, And Luna says, "You're holding up the peace deal, Voldemar. It's time to accept it. Not to mention you are refusing to hold elections, and your government funneled money the U.S. sent to Ukraine back into Joe Biden's re-election campaign." So I think that's the only reason that the Republicans have a problem with the Ukraine war at this point, is because they helped the Democrats. But still, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, I guess, in this situation. And, Democrats, on the other hand, do not have good takes on this. And I'll show you what I mean. Now, this is not necessarily a Democratic politician, but this is definitely a brunch lib voice of the brunch libs. Stan Cedar here. And this is from Michael David. He says MSNB Cedar is a bit of a scumbag, a bitter little scumbag. So Sam Cedar defends his continued support to fund and arm Nazis in Ukraine and jokes about using Ukrainians as expendable cannon fodder to destabilize Russia, agreeing that it's a win-win for NATO liberals. Listen to this.
Of Ukrainian Nazis than to put them between Ukrainian civilians and encroaching fascist Russians. It's like throwing segregationists at the Atlantic Wall during World War II on D-Day. It's win-win. I mean, there's a good point there.
Okay. Now, when you think about the point he's actually making here, I actually kind of agree with him in the sense that he's like, if Nazis are dying fighting the Russians in Ukraine, then it's a win-win, which is kind of like, okay. Like, what if they kill off all the Ukrainian Nazis in a war with Russia, and then at the end they make peace and they move on with their lives? Maybe that's the end game. I don't think that that's the end game, but that's a byproduct that Mr. Cedar is willing to accept, apparently. Dead Nazis. Now, we know that we're funding these Nazis also because there was a resolution in Congress put up by Ro Khanna a while back to stop funding these Nazi militias. But I digress. The point Sam is making, I don't think is a totally bad one, even though I'm not a fan of, and it's also another means for them to keep this war going. But let's listen.
Every country seems to have a Nazi contingent.
Seem to gravitate towards the armed forces.
Exactly.
For some reason.
With smoke bombs and drums, some 3,000 members of Ukraine's nationalist Azov battalion marched through the capital, Kyiv. In a show of force, they lit flares outside the parliament building. It was a warning to the government against making any potential deal that would lead to elections in separatist-controlled territory of eastern Ukraine. The Azov battalion was formed in 2014 to fight Russia-backed separatists in Ukraine's east and is now part of the Interior Ministry's National Guard. They also called for Ukraine's borders to be fully restored. The battalion's leader vowed there would be more protests outside parliament if the government failed to heed their warnings.
It was formed in 2014, which is when the U.S., involvement really ramped up there, ironically, or maybe not ironically. But you take all this into account, the fact that conservatives are actually kind of against it. Liberals love it, somehow giving money to Nazis to fight Russia. And then you add this nice little kind of layer of glaze on top of it. Here you go. And that is the corruption layer. Quick, send more money to the people. So this is, Mike Pompeo's tweet that we need to stand with Ukraine. And this was my response. Quick, send more money to the people robbing us. Stat. People always, one of the news items I like to post in response to people is a Seymour Hersh piece about how Zelensky's embezzling all this money, and they always go, Seymour Hersh, and attack the messenger. So then I have to follow up with, okay, so the BBC is also doing Russian propaganda. Is that the case too, guys? It's all Russian propaganda. And then you also have this. The Zelensky embezzled $400 million. This is the Seymour Hersh one. Is from the source, but of course you didn't see this one take off really in the U.S. press for obvious reasons, because they want to keep getting kickbacks from your tax dollars. So that's how it's going to continue to work. And with that, I say, Russian propaganda, we piss on Ukraine. Fuck Ukraine. I'm tired of any country absorbing money that the United States desperately needs here on our own shores. And I can't remember who kind of summed this up about how these foreign wars basically rob the working class of our money and send it to elites in other countries. And you look at like a situation like Ukraine, Hunter Biden had a no-show job on some energy board there. So some of the money is probably going to people like him. And, say what you want about Hunter Biden. I don't think he really needs that money. I don't think he deserves that money anymore. But, people can argue too, the Trump administration is far more corrupt, and I agree. Like, let's root it out wherever it is. However, the people that hold power currently seem to be kind of against this a little bit. Like, it's just, I don't know where it ends, because it's pretty clear that Donald Trump can't do anything about it. The powers that be want it to keep going, and the people in Europe want it to keep going, to the point where I don't think he can even stop it. So maybe it's just one of those things where it has to implode or, peter out under its own weight. I don't know, but let's move on to our next item of business. And like I said, I rearranged my show right before I came on today. And I started about a half an hour early because I knew I was going to go long. So I usually start around 2:30. Thank you all for joining me, as usual. This week, the last couple of weeks I've talked a lot about the Iran war and the Ukraine war, but there's a bunch of other things going on that I've just kind of glossed over based on, so much to cover, so little time. Well, one of those little countries currently resisting United States imperialism in Latin America popped up on my radar, peaked my VU meter a little bit this week based on some of the stuff that they are doing. So it started kind of with this. All right, wait a minute. Hold on. That's not it. We already showed you that one. Like I said, I rearranged my shit. Okay, started with this. And this is a tweet where, I kind of said the USA won't change till stuff like this starts happening here. Because it's pretty clear that voting ain't gonna change nothing. And I've seen Jimmy Dore talking quite a bit about this, but it's gonna take this kind of resistance, this kind of an economic shutdown to really change the dynamics here in the West. But I digress. I've kind of skirted past Bolivia and Cuba for the past couple weeks because so much other news has been happening. But let's talk about Bolivia. And I saw these protests, and based on my understanding, the Bolivian people kind of became wise to what the game that the United States is playing, and they weren't having it. So this kind of summarizes a little bit of the current dynamic. And it says, let me get up to this real quick. This is what Bolivia's highways look like at the moment. Each town and village blocks their stretch. The union members, each community take turns at the barricades. This is part of the general strike against neoliberalism, now entering week 3. Now, I want to show you the American news coverage here. Let's watch this coverage from CNN. Here, let me start this over real quick.
Clashed with police in Bolivia's capital as demonstrations spread across the country. The protests have been sparked by rising living costs and economic pressure that have since grown into a nationwide anti-government movement backed by workers' unions, farmers, and supporters of former President Evo Morales.
Así como hemos votado por él, hemos creído, ese compromiso no ha cumplido. ¿De qué? Solamente tan fácil. ¿Qué hace ahora? Matar a nuestros hermanos. Eso nunca vamos a perdonar.
You should resign.
Many demonstrators are demanding President Rodrigo Paz resign, while road blockades have caused shortages of food, fuel, and medical supplies in parts of the country. The president announced on Monday that he will cut his salary and those of his cabinet ministers in half amid the increasing political crisis in the country.
En Bolivia jamás hemos ganado con confrontación y a estos señores les vamos a ganar, los que están haciendo uso de un momento crítico del país. Políticamente les vamos a ganar en el diálogo. La única forma de ganar hoy día, querido Fernando, no va a ser a bala.
On Wednesday, Paz signed a law allowing military forces to intervene in internal conflicts, effectively lifting previous restrictions, though his government said that declaring a state of emergency is the last option it will turn to if dialogue fails.
So what basically happened is they just enabled the military to start going after these protesters. We'll see how that turns out. But I would be remiss if I did not share with you an alternative perspective. So let's get to that now. Here is the un-CNN story. And this is translated from Spanish, so bear with me. Thousands of Bolivian miners and workers joined together against the regime of Rodrigo Paz, a puppet of the United States, which seeks to hand over the resources and privatize the country to deliver it to the empire. Imperialism wants Bolivia to become another Argentina. The people said enough and are fighting to prevent it. Military to deal with. And look at this. This is the people in the streets here. Holy shit. That is a lot of people. So what does that mean if he's going to turn the military on these people? This is protesters. Let's look at some of the Bolivia giving the world a lesson in dignity. Why didn't they go vote? These are a lot. I'm sure these damn gringos for prevent charges against anyone who opposes their country being looted. So this is kind of look at the amount of people here. That is hundreds of thousands of people. Tens of thousands. I mean, it looks like hundreds of thousands. Maybe it's tens of thousands. I don't know. That's a lot of people. That looks like the majority of the fucking people in the country to me. I could be wrong. Here's some more footage from the ground in the country of Bolivia. For this reason, Che Guevara chose Bolivia for the Latin American Revolution. This is a struggle against foreign domination and its action, practice, and courage of a people who resist being stripped of all their wealth. Bolivia is an example to follow. Out with the colonialists. So this looks like, cut this. So as you can see, a little bit of a different perspective than from what CNN's showing you. So one more little piece of information here. This is the, I don't know if this is in English. The indigenous leaders of La Paz, Bolivia. We don't want dialogue or negotiation with those who have our blood on their hands. We'll be at the barricades until the president is gone.
Nosotros advirtemos al señor Rodrigo.
So it's in Spanish, but you get the idea. The backdrop of this, of course, is the U.S. war on Iran through our proxy in the Middle East, our greatest ally, and the U.S. war on Ukraine via our proxy in Russia. Last but not least, as we close this out, I want to play you this clip, or just show you this. Also show you this piece from Revolutionary Blackout Network, as Cuba is another country that's, at risk of U.S. imperialism being used against it. Cuban foreign minister, the time has come for solidarity with Cuba, a country that has always stood with others, even at a great risk, with no precedent through intimidation and sanctions. Secondary sanctions applied to third parties. The U.S. government intends to force all states to participate against their will. Its atrocious policies against Cuba, which will not happen. I ask the international community to mobilize to prevent a humanitarian catastrophe that could be imposed by force of arms or through the energy siege, the extreme tightening of the blockade, which will also kill and cause suffering. So, again, solidarity with Cuba, solidarity with Bolivia. Americans did not vote for any of this. If Trump had gone out and said, hey, I really want to invade, continue what Biden's doing in Gaza and in fact, just give them the entire reins of our military and then start bombing Iran and then invade Cuba and invade Bolivia, invade Latin America. Come on, guys, let's do it. He would have lost to Kamala easily. And the reason that he won is because this would have happened under Kamala too. That's the reality. And I think a lot of people took a chance on Trump thinking, hey, maybe there's a chance that he can resist the, bullshit of this. But keep in mind that, just I ask you amidst this, people of the world outside the United States who might be watching, just keep in mind that we here, the people in the United States, have been voting again and again and again to rein in our belligerent ass war state and focus on our own internal problems. Like, none of us want to police Bolivia or police Cuba, or we could be so much more powerful on the world stage if we weren't doing this kind of, bastardly shit that we're doing on the world stage, and somehow no matter who we vote for, they always end up doing this foreign adventurism. So let's keep going here. We're going to talk now about the Democrats, and we're going to talk about Graham Platner, because he's become something of a thing in the Democratic Party. Thankfully, I have this shit set out. So I've been a pretty fierce advocate for third parties, especially in this election cycle. This is from David Sirota. Now, David Sirota has me blocked, which I love to bring up, as does Anna Kasparian and a bunch of the brunch liberals who were against Jimmy Dore and Force the Vote when it was happening. But I digress. Graham Platner is a rising star in the Democratic Party because this guy does not give a fuck. It seems. So it seems. And, correct me if I'm wrong. I've seen some liberal voices or some left-leaning voices that I trust that don't like this guy. But I would say this. This is how I see it. As someone who's been a fierce advocate of voting third party, staying outside the duopoly, this is one of the few Democrats I would vote for. And I'll tell you why. The establishment hates the guy. And he's very anti-Israel, very anti our greatest ally. So they're doing everything they can to smear this guy in the most establishment ways possible. They've already done the Nazi tattoo, the racism, and the anti-Semitism, and the sex. Now, he did the sex in a way that we don't like. He did a look, you guys, he did the sex. Look, he did the sex. That always comes out, and especially now that Trump is in office. Yeah, there's no way, unless it's like he pinned some girl down, or he raped a child or something against their will. There's no way it matters. It's none of your fucking business. And I think people are past the point where that kind of has much of a say on their politics, thankfully. Because guess what? Much like shitting and eating, everybody fucks. Man, woman, trans, gay, straight, gender fluid, everybody fucks. Unless you're asexual. There's some asexual people, don't get me wrong, but everybody fucks. So it's the one kind of universal thing we have across genders that, you can always get some, well, I did the sex in a way that we don't like. Oh! But people like Cenk Uygur here get it on Platner. Hold on a second. Let me take a quick aside here. Give me 1 second. I'll be right back. All right, sorry about that. Had to answer a text message. Forgive me for my absence. Anyway, to keep going here, Cenk gets it on Platner because he's basically saying right here, does everybody see these coordinated attacks against Platner? It's on every cable network. It's from politicians from both parties. And the reason the establishment's so afraid of him is because he actually intends to use his power as explained below. We have to fight back together. So this says he's plotting a political revolution against oligarchs and leaders of both parties. Here's why they're scared. So that's I didn't read Sirota's article because I'm blocked by him, but Sirota does, like a broken clock, he does good work every once in a while. So hopefully this is one of those cases where Sirota is actually doing good work, and we appreciate that. But the reality is, with Platner, he's one of the guys who's not afraid to not take money from our greatest ally. They've already tried the he's a racist, he's anti-Semite stuff, as I said. So you can see, what they're trying to do with this guy. Anyway. This is Exhibit A as to why this guy is a big problem, or Exhibit B, if you will, since I kind of already showed you Exhibit A. He's already talking about going after insider trading. Susan Collins has one of the best performing stock portfolios in the Senate, and that should be illegal. So it's funny because Susan Collins is one of those people too, whoever really thought about Maine as like a state in play. It's kind of like Susan Collins has always just kind of been, it's like McConnell or Lindsey Graham. They've just always kind of comfortably sailed into re-election. But this is another good line of attack that Platner's taken here from a populist leftist angle, which the Democrats almost never do. This is a very effective attack. I'm sure, because in Maine, it's, they got Kennebunkport, which is where the president hangs out, So there's never, it doesn't sound like there's ever been a real populist challenger in Maine, but the majority of the population outside of, the place where the president vacations, I'm sure, is pretty normal, like fisherman type, blue collar. I know some guys from Maine, so they're very blue collar types. They're not insane, transsexual liberals or anything. But that aside, the guy's running a blue collar campaign, and he will likely win based on the looks of it. But of course, they're going to keep going with these types of, culture war type scandals, And so look at what he says here. He says, if you want to yell at Susan Collins, you better buy a $1,000 dinner. The last time she held a town hall, Bill Clinton was president. As senator, working class Mainers will always have a direct line. Billionaires can call and talk to an intern for a change. So again, this is a very effective line of attack. He's pointing out how she's part of the establishment. She's long been the person that, is the line for the elites in Washington, in the state, and he's going to flip that on its head. So what happens when you start to effectively attack an opponent like this, and it looks like you might unseat a candidate that's backed by our greatest ally? Well, that's when the sex scandals start to come out, of course. So this is from Newswire. Maine Democratic Senate candidate Graham Platner engulfed in sex text scandal after wife alerts campaign to explicit messages with up to 6 women. Now, this guy says, of course, the obvious. The president's a rapist pedo who cheated on all of his wives. I'm not hearing this shit. Graham will be a great senator. I don't know if I necessarily agree with the pedo stuff. Until you're convicted in a court of law, that's a tough one. The guy has kids. He's obviously covering for Epstein and stuff. So that's up for debate. And again, I feel no sympathy for Donald Trump, so maybe he does deserve to be called that. But I digress. I want to show you now because this is not going to work again. His wife came out and responded to this. And we don't have to watch all of this, but Gay Barista Paul shared this tweet, and he asked the question, is she being held hostage? To which I don't know the answer, but let's listen to what she has to say at least.
Amy, I wanted to make a statement today, and sorry, I'm getting eaten by bugs. I wanted to make a statement today in response to a couple of news articles that are out there about my marriage to Graham. If anybody knows me and Graham personally, you know that we got married in 2023. We live in Sullivan. We've got 2 dogs, and we love each other deeply. So it makes me really angry, disappointed, and I find it really shameful that there's a group of media outlets and people who are willing to spread gossip instead of talking about real issues that Graham is running on, like healthcare and education and childcare. I'm walking up and down my road right now, and this is like my 20th take. This is very hard to do, but I just really wanted to make sure that everyone knows that Graham and I have a great marriage. Being married is hard. Being newly married is hard. Being newly married and going through infertility is hard.
So, okay, I don't want to go through the whole thing, but she clearly, I think the greatest point she made at the beginning was, why are we talking about this instead of political issues? Because everyone has these kind of sexual issues in their lives. Everyone has these kind of, stones. You could throw these stones at just about anyone. And when you live in the kind of sexual glass house that Donald Trump lives in, it's pretty hard for right-wingers to throw stones. But when you're a liberal Democrat who voted for Joe Biden, who had multiple credible accusations of sexual assault against him, as well as Bill Clinton, who had multiple credible accusations of sexual assault, you just don't have any kind of moral high ground to stand on. So just stop it. Just stop it. Okay. And to keep going here, I want to show you now why they're attacking this guy, because this is the effect that he's already starting to have on other races in his neighborhood. So it's looking like the guy he endorsed in the governor's race is now taking the lead. So the people are clearly on his side here. So Jackson was the underdog of underdogs just a few weeks ago. Platner's endorsement, flipping the race on its head, is a stunning testament to his grip on the Democratic base in Maine. So this guy Jackson is now up in the top tier, predicted towards winning in the governor's race. And then you have kind of the, just the general consensus is going on in this guy's favor, right? The blue collar left, blue collar right, whatever, the blue collar voters in Maine are on his side. And so it's looking like he's kind of a shoo-in to win. And of course, they're going to throw everything they can at him. And this is a tweet from Emma Vigeland, but, just ignore the source and kind of focus on the content here. But this is footage of Collins. So Senator Collins responds to the scurrilous claim from Graham Platner that she sent him to die in Iraq. That was Platner's decisions to desert. So let's listen to her.
He enlisted twice. Correct. What is your comment on that?
Well, first of all, he not only enlisted twice after the war was started, but he also went to work for a security company, a controversial one named Blackwater, after his term in the service was over. So I respect anyone who steps forward to serve their country. But the fact is, that was Platner's decision to serve. He was not drafted.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, so see what happens when she has to face a real opponent. Now, the only thing better than this was Platner's actual response to her, which was this. There hasn't been a draft in over 50 years. Every single one of the 7,000 young men and women Susan Collins sent to die in Iraq and Afghanistan enlisted. What a disgusting slap in the face to their families and a callous disregard for their sacrifice. So Collins is kind of a geriatric tool of the establishment. And I hope Platner takes her out, Nazi tattoo and all. But, you know, it's one of those things where if Democrats actually have the courage of their convictions, they can run like this. Very few of them have that anymore. But kudos to Graham Platner. And again, if you know something about this guy that I don't, you know, maybe I'm missing something on him. But it seems to me like all the smears against him, all the people trying to make him look like he's this terrible militaristic, you know, whatever. Maybe they're going to smear him as a CIA tool next or whatever. He was in the military, but he's saying the right things as far as healthcare and everything else is concerned. And he's making Susan Collins look like an establishment tool, or the establishment tool that she is. Speaking of tools, Bernie Sanders. Let's talk about it. So Bernie Sanders has recently taken some flack for this clip that's been going viral recently. And before I even comment, let's just give it a look here, shall we?
And polls among Palestinians in the occupied West Bank and Gaza are showing that they're increasingly in favor of a one-state solution with equal rights for Israelis and Palestinians alike and equal citizenship. Is that something you believe could happen, or is that something you support?
No, I don't. I mean, I think if that happens, then that would be the end of the state of Israel. And I support Israel's right to exist.
Do you think polls among Palestinians...
So that's, I think, to be fair to Bernie, let's watch that one more time.
In the occupied West Bank and Gaza are showing that they're increasingly in favor of a one-state solution with equal rights for Israelis and Palestinians alike and equal citizenship. Is that something you believe could happen, or is that something you support?
No, I don't. I mean, I think if that happens, then that would be the end of the state of Israel. And I support Israel's right to exist.
Do you think polls among Palestinians...
Okay, so let's pause there for a minute. So to be fair to Bernie, I do think this is part of a larger conversation. I don't remember the entire interview, but there was some larger context there, but he does, at the end of the day, pay fealty to, you know, our greatest ally. Now, quite a few people were kind of shocked by this, and I actually got this confused with another interview he did a while back, you know. So while this might be shocking to some people, it isn't new. And a lot of people forgot about this interview. I'm going to show you this one now. And this was a woman in the UK, which, you know, she has a similar look to, once I saw them, you know, she's obviously a different person, but similar kind of, you know, this is from February of 2024, but a similar line of questioning. And, you know, listen to Bernie. Here
is what Israel is doing in Gaza a genocide?
In my view, it is absolutely disgraceful, horrible, and I'm doing, as a United States Senator, everything I can to end it. And where I'm sitting is, and I don't know how many people know this, every year the United States provides about $3.5 billion in military aid to Israel. On top of that, there is a bill. I was supposed to be here earlier. Couldn't come because a bill came up for not just all for Israel, $95 billion, including $14 billion for Israel. And I have led the opposition to that. I do not want to see the United States complicit in what Netanyahu and his right-wing lunatic friends are doing right now to the Palestinian people. So my job right now is to support what the United Nations is trying to do, have a humanitarian ceasefire, see if we can get the humanitarian aid immediately in there, and work out, as complex and difficult as it is, some type of long-term solution to what's going on there.
But do you buy the South African case at the International Court of Justice that what Israel is doing in Gaza constitutes genocide?
So I like her follow-up too. I said this at the time. It's very clear this isn't an American journalist because she actually asks him follow-up questions. But listen,
or genocidal acts.
I think, look, we can argue about definitions. It is horrible. Right now, 29,000 people have been killed.
She's like, hey, yo, there's actually a pretty common, pretty standard definition for this based on what South Africa did, and we could apply that here, and it kind of works. What do you think?
And some 70,000 have been injured. Some 65% of the housing units have been destroyed or damaged. And I am worried right now, and I almost wonder why I'm in the UK and not back in the US dealing with this stuff, is that we have hundreds of thousands of children are facing starvation. That's what I have to work on right now.
But if one agrees that it is a genocide, it means that other states have a legal right and duty to prevent genocidal acts being carried out.
But see, we can talk about that. But what does
He
that
starts
mean
getting mad.
in real terms? Right now, what I am trying to do is what I think is probably maybe, and I can do it because I'm a senator. You can't. Right now, maybe, if we tell Mr. Netanyahu that he's not getting a check for $10 billion more to continue his aggressive action, he and his right-wing friends may decide it is not a good idea to continue to do that.
Now,
that's where I am.
To show you how inept Bernie Sanders is, this is 2024. This is 2 years ago. Not a fucking thing. Not a fucking thing. In fact, it's even expanded. Now they're... Anyway, this is that...
I'm
sorry.
Coming from.
In addition to stopping the billions of dollars in military aid that Israel gets from the United States every year, would you back calls for a cultural, sporting, and economic boycott of Israel?
I am nervous about economic boycotts of any country, to be honest with you. But right now, what people want to do, they can do what they want to do. But right now, again, my job as a United States Senator, and I'm kind of leading that effort in the Senate, is to tell Netanyahu that he is not going to get any more U.S. aid.
Did you feel nervous about the boycott movement against apartheid South Africa? Was that a concern you had at the time?
What I thought that as an apartheid state at that point, it was important.
This girl is good.
But people can do as they want.
People can do as they want.
That's all.
Do you think that it's right that British citizens and American citizens can go and fight in the IDF when, as you say, there are some profound humanitarian concerns in Gaza?
Well, I think if British and American people want to do that, I suppose they have the right to do something that I don't thought a whole lot about.
Do you think
Israel has the right to exist? Israel has the right to
I
exist.
think
Israel has the
what
right to
the
exist.
Israeli government doing now is horrible, and I'm not quite sure why people would want to be, part of that effort.
Anyway, Bernie has always been weak on this shit, as we know, and it's no surprise to see him say, what he said about, the Palestinian one-state solution.
You go back to your home on Whore Island.
So then you have some Russian propaganda. Let me serve up a little more Russian propaganda for you here. Then you got Bernie's recent Fight the Oligarchy tour. And I said right here, this is some legit Russian propaganda for you. Bernie Sanders spent $600,000 on luxury travel on the Fighting Oligarchy tour. The committee paid $562,000 for 11 private jet trips and $16,000 for a chauffeured car or limousine service. 11 times for lodging, it paid $29,000 to stay at a 4-star hotel. 15 times That spending is nothing compared to the spending on Ed Galrain's campaign. Oh, you thought you could vote your way out of this. Anyway, you get the idea. So it makes sense why Bernie hates Russia. But the Democrats are, of course, still hungry for war with Russia. So let's look at this post from Nick Cruz at RBN, one of my favorites. And Nick says, Bernie Sanders, notable Jewish supremacist, is furious that Vladimir Putin saved Ukrainian kids from the Epstein regime. Epstein files revealed that Ukraine was his backyard where he found kids to rape. The West will never forgive Putin for shutting down their sick operation. In addition to causing death and destruction in Ukraine, Vladimir Putin, one of the world's richest oligarchs, sent hundreds of thousands of young Russians to the deaths on the bed. Maybe Russians are catching on that Putin is not serving. Nick says Bernie Sanders is NATO leftist scum. So there's a whole thread here where Nick goes into the details, but just to show you how bad this gets, this is an account called Democratic Wins Media, and here they are promoting war with Ukraine via the EU. This is Kaya Kallas, VP of the EU Commission, slamming Donald Trump for being a coward.
Well, this is what Russia does because he's not really gaining ground on the battlefield. So what they are doing now is really increasing the terrorist attacks because you can't really describe it in other ways.
What's really funny is these people will pretend like Ukraine didn't just hit a school full of Russian kids and that this isn't a response to that. That's how dumb these people think we are. And it's anyway.
Creating fear inside the society. It hasn't worked for 4 years, but I don't think that it's going to work now. Also, what we heard from Ukraine yesterday was that all the embassies stayed except one. So that also takes courage from those embassies. But yes, all the European states, America left. Well,
so according to this community note, the EU has corrected Kallas's claim the U.S. Embassy left. United States and Ukraine also denied the claim. Do you find this helpful? So you get the idea. I don't necessarily believe the Kiev Post either, I have to say. Not a... Probably froze up my computer, but not the most reliable source. That's like basically a United States media, intelligence media outlet. Anything Kiev Post, anything based in Ukraine. Well, then you have Anonymous calling for Ukraine war dissenters to be jailed, as if to out bootlick the Democrats. Anonymous enters the fray and says war protesters should be jailed with updated treason laws. Doesn't get any dumber than that. Look at this. Russia's going to lose. Ukraine's on the path to victory. It's only a matter of time. Europe needs to put together a commission to identify all the propagandists that back the invasion and also issue arrest warrants and massive fines. Treason laws need to be updated as well. So basically, anyone that reports the reality that the Ukraine is not doing well should be up for treason charges. That's what, and we're supposed to believe, like I said, imagine thinking Anonymous is a real hacker group and not a bunch of bootlicking war pigs. But just to keep going down, keep hammering, not even hammering. I don't want to hammer, but to keep threading this, needling, pulling this thread of what the Democrats are up to. Here is yet another example of all-out bootlicking. I said, hurry and vote for Democrats. Here's Josh Shapiro,
and they are having
governor
their
of
voices.
Pennsylvania, saying that tracking AIPAC is dangerous, and those who monitor their political donations are anti-Semites.
What we have seen is a weaponization of that.
Imagine if there was like a black caucus, group, and we wanted to monitor their donations to political candidates, and these guys called us racists for monitoring, like the Black Panthers political donations or something like that. This is the only situation where you get to be a victim of racism in this.
And I think that is a danger for our system. When you have people who are advocating for issues that they feel strongly about, and they are having their voices silenced, I think that's a problem in our system.
There's a blur between I hear you. It's definitely a tiger by the tail.
Against Jewish folks giving money, you're saying.
I think it does get blurred because now what you are seeing is not, quote unquote, AIPAC money or however it was termed, but you're getting the Jews who give to that candidate who also support AIPAC. I think it's very dangerous in our system. If you are trying to silence certain voices based on their race, based on their faith, based on their particular ideology.
So again, it's
ADL is played out. Nobody knows who the ADL are. Stop giving them attention. Nobody cares about the ADL.
So there you have it. The Democrats, ladies and gentlemen. But it doesn't end there. This is the future of the Democratic Party. Hassan Piker and AOC, they're going to play the Bernie Sanders sheepdog populist leftists into the corporate Zyopig Democratic Party role in the coming election cycle, since people have largely wised up to the Bernie Sanders game. But I digress. I think that it's time for us to move on to what I view as one of the kind of banner stories of the day here. And that involves one of the people who I have a ton of respect for in the political dialogue or the political, kind of, what's the word? Talk space, political lexicon, I guess. And that would be Norm Finkelstein. And I think this is an interesting kind of bit because, he's a guy that I've always trusted, but, people can't be right 100% of the time. People can't be correct 100% of the time. You're not going to agree with people 100% of the time. So I do want to start this by saying that I still love and respect Mr. Finkelstein. I still view him as a, voice of rationality on this issue. One of the better voices, one of the Jews against Zionism, kind of disproving the whole idea that anyone who says Zionist is racist against Jewish people. Norm is a very vocal anti-Zionist Jew, which kind of proves the fact that Zionism isn't a code language for Jews as much as the, woke right want to weaponize racism against Jewish people to defend themselves. Norman Finkelstein is a Jewish. Now, there's a lot in this interview that Finkelstein discusses with the interviewer, and I'm not going to touch on all of it, but he kind of at the beginning apologizes a lot for Bernie Sanders, which you would expect. He kind of sticks up for Bernie Sanders, so to speak. And then he talks a little bit about how the term globalize the intifada is kind of an empty slogan, which I agree with. And then he talks about how anti-Semitism has been ginned up as a pretext to kind of, suppress bad news, which I think is a great way to put it. And then he kind of face plants into this really, I don't think it's a great take, but I want to listen to some of it. We're not going to listen to the whole thing again, but I want to listen to some of it and discuss it with you and get your thoughts, because I do think he makes some interesting points. And again, I don't think that he's 100% wrong either with all the stuff he says in this interview. And again, I also don't think that I don't believe that this discredits any of his, previous views or anything. So let's get into it. Let's watch this Norm Finkelstein on Joe Politics podcast, which is something I've never heard of, but
to Professor Chomsky, I came from a home where you don't trivialize life. Your whole family was exterminated. Everything begins with life. So I never trivialized it, but in my politics, in my pre-Chomsky era, there was the flamboyance of the left, the Black Panther Party, and things like that, and I was part of it.
So I want to start by saying, you'll hear this, but he really romanticizes the left and like the Black Panthers and that era of the left from the 60s, where it was like the left battling this fascist right-wing corporate front. That era is over. And I don't even know, anyway, let's listen to him. I'll try not to interrupt.
You have to be serious. A slogan can do damage to a movement. And movements are ultimately about life, about the sacredness of life, about the value of life. And you have to be serious. But I will not cede ground on the principle.
On the point of morality and not ceding ground, there is, in the last, 2 months maybe, there's been this road to Damascus for people like Tucker Carlson, where who've previously been some of the biggest cheerleaders for Donald Trump, the president who campaigned on his friendship with Israel prior to his second election. And now in the last couple of weeks, Tucker Carlson turning around and saying that he was wrong. What do you think triggers that kind of change of heart in somebody that could already, you would imagine, could see the actions of a president or the potential actions of a president? Why do you think there's a change of heart?
Let me answer that question before he starts. It's called someone doing the opposite of what they said they were going to do. That's what triggers it. And you being an honest person. Okay. Like I showed the reel at the beginning of this, of Trump saying, maybe I should show it again before we go into this. Maybe I'll cut it in post. But I played the reel of Trump saying time and time again, he's not going to do new wars. He's not going to do new wars. So they're like, oh, why is Tucker Carlson suddenly against Trump when he supported him? Because Trump's not doing the fucking things he said he was going to do. That's why. That's that simple. But let me let these guys pontificate here. Let's dive into this. Full.
I don't know Tucker Carlson personally. I once had a long phone conversation with him where it was a kind of what you might call a pre-interview, and which is normal.
I'm going to speed this up a little bit more because Norm does talk very slow, and this actually helps increase the entertainment value of this piece. So let's go. Here we go.
He wants to assess whether I was the type of personality he wanted on his program. And that's perfectly reasonable. And I didn't pass muster. Exactly why I didn't pass muster, I can't answer that question. It could have been because I came across as too academic for the kind of program he does, though that's now a little bit.
Okay. So right off the bat, you get that like, oh, well, I was just too smart for him. That's the problem. And it's like, okay, Norm, we get it. You're a professor. You're super smart college.
Implausible because he had Jeffrey Sachs on. And so Jeffrey Sachs is.
So you're bitter because he had Jeffrey Sachs on and not you. And I don't know why Tucker didn't have Norm on his show if he didn't. I know that Tucker has definitely knows who Norm is and has spoken about him and hasn't said anything ill about him. But Candace, anyway,
probably the top 1% in our country, meaning the U.S. So I'm now doubtful that was the explanation. Another explanation is that I'm a person firmly of the left, and my whole outlook is colored by my sense of loyalty and faithfulness to a historic tradition with which all its errors, mistakes, and crimes notwithstanding, I still think was basically right.
Okay, so that again, this is the part that gets me, because this is the brunch lib mentality. Despite the reality that the people that we keep voting for that claim to be the left don't do anything and nothing has changed, I'm still clinging to the idea that that's better, and it's just not. And that's the tribalism that prevents us from frankly uniting with people we agree with on these issues. Who cares what? I don't give a shit what Tucker Carlson does in his personal life, if he's a secret Fed or whatever, like everyone wants to say is. I don't give a shit what he thinks on any other issue. Why not go with him on? He's right on this one. And so, okay, you're on my team on this one. Let's work to do something about it. That's it. Maybe he comes on another issue and you're like, hey, I think your language against Mexicans is a little out there and I don't like it. Let's talk about it. Then maybe you don't agree with him on the immigration stuff. Fine. But what the fuck is this thing where it's like, oh, well, you're on the right and I'm on the left, so I can't be friends with you and we can't do anything together. Fuck off.
Determined it. But I don't know Tucker Carlson. I was on Candace Owens for, I was told, the longest interview she ever did, 2 hours and 40 minutes. I managed, I believe, to remain principled, though I had to ignore many of her comments, which I thought were beyond left field and probably outside our planetary system. I ignored them, but strategically focused on those points where I felt I had to make clear.
So again, he's saying what I just said right here. Even though he disagrees with Candace Owens on some stuff, he went on her show and just didn't talk about those things that they disagree on. It might be good for you to go back and talk about the things that you disagree on. You might see eye to eye on some of them, actually. Jesus Christ.
Where I stood. It doesn't come off as if I avoided certain questions in order to curry favor. That is a careerist. So that being said, I'm not going to answer your question specifically with Tucker Carlson. I'll answer it in a more general, but I think still concrete way. Palestine was never a cause of the right. I mean, Israel was, in the sense that there were anti-Semites who didn't like Israel. Of course, I met them when I first got involved. It was clear they didn't like Israel.
Okay, now here we go again. I look back at people like Pat Buchanan or some of these people, like even Ron Paul was called an anti-Semite or a white supremacist because he didn't like Israel. And it's not even that they didn't like Israel. It's that they could see in advance what was happening, where Israel became this thing that controlled American politics. People like Pat Buchanan were calling this out way back in like the late 80s. You know what I mean? Maybe even before that. And the answer to that, as we've seen, was to call them racists. And so he's doing that now. Like, this is what he said. Anti-Semites who didn't like Israel. Anyway, this shit pisses me off. It's because he's better than this. That's why it upsets me.
And they use Palestine as a way of getting at Israel. But it's never a cause of the right.
So they used Palestine. Okay, again, even if this is the dumbest, this is like the Israeli Mossad argument, but even if these people are disingenuously using Palestine to make money, like the idea is like, oh yeah, you're going to make tons of money by being against Israel. That's how you make tons of money in the world. Yeah, right, you fucking idiots. You get debanked and deplatformed. Look at Kanye. Fuck off with that. You're like, oh, you're going to make a bunch of money being against Israel. Fuck you, you dumb rube. But again, let's say that that's what they're doing. Let's just say that they're disingenuously using Palestine to like get at Israel. Fine. As long as they're on the same side, who cares what their moral rationale is for that? That, of course, isn't the case. But when you're in politics, you build coalitions that you win with, and you don't examine the fucking like moral nuance of every person that's on your team and kick out people. You know what I mean? You build a coalition and you get your issue fucking pushed forward or whatever. It's like no one who's ever won. You look at like Barack Obama, and I'm sorry that this is making me so emotionally upset, but like that guy didn't win by going like, no, fuck you, Republicans, you can't be part of my campaign. He was smart. He had a broad appeal. He was like, look, I'm not going to tell you not to vote. He played to the middle. He played to the right. He played to the like militaristic, and he was smart. He ran a smart campaign. Regardless of what you think about Barack Obama, he was a classy dude who knew how to win and speak to people. Anyway, I got sidetracked here. But the point is, this is not how you win. This is not how you get your issue. This is not how you move forward on your issue. This is why the left does not win. This is why we don't have healthcare. This is why there's still fucking billions of dollars in fucking arms going to a fucking goddamn mass murder of women and children in another country because of this kind of nonsense.
Oppressed peoples a right-wing cause. Third world people, a right-wing cause. Suffering, human suffering, a right-wing cause. Not really. It was always, I won't say always, but because there was a period where Jews were the oppressed group. And when a portion of that oppressed group decided to found their own state, that seemed a plausible response to the Nazi Holocaust. And that group all claimed to be socialists. They all claimed to be leftists. Ben-Gurion fashioned himself, and he was seen as the Zionist Lenin. That's what he was.
You know who else did that? The Third Reich. They pretended to be socialists. They weren't socialists. Elon Musk out here like, Hitler was left wing. No, he wasn't, you dumb motherfucker. Maybe he said he was. You take Hitler at his word? No, there's actually like historical record of things people did, and the things that the Third Reich did were very right-wing and authoritarian. These things have a definition. Now, Finkelstein here clinging to this like whole right versus left thing is a self-defeating thing, because it's very clear that the left in America is not the left. And now he sounds just like these scummy Zionists who use racism as a cudgel to defend from criticism. But let's keep going.
He was cool. He was the Zionist. So for all those reasons, Israel was a left-wing cause, not the Arabs, because the Arabs were seen back then as being the Effendis, the feudalists, the kings and the pashas and all that. So they were the right wing.
So what he's basically telling you, too, is that's how they got this issue pushed back in the day. And they're still trying to do that despite us being able to see through it now. They'll say like, oh, like in Palestine, they throw gays off buildings or whatever, you know, that. But that's how they sold this back in the day, is like, look, we're the good liberals fighting against the oppressive Arabs. And that's the point he's making. It used to be that Israel was the left-wing cause.
Now, obviously, it's changed. So since you could say roughly 1967, that's kind of the breaking point. Palestine was a left-wing cause. It was a part of it was solidly in the left trajectory. National liberation struggle, armed struggle, suffering of oppressed peoples, third world struggle. So it felt naturally, as I said, in my historic tradition. But now suddenly, it's become a right-wing cause. The main exponents of criticism of Israel, the left no longer has any salience, because it has no salience in the podcast world whatsoever.
So, okay, again, this is where it gets fucking stupid. Okay, no, that's not the actual take, Boomer. That's not actually what's going on. The reason is because the parties historically shift back and forth. The Democrats, like it or not, were at one time the party of the KKK. Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. He did the Emancipation Proclamation. That's a very verifiable part of American history. But that changed. And the Democrats were the ones who passed the civil rights laws. And then there was the Goldwater era of the Republicans, where the racists and the silent majority and the racists kind of migrated back to over to the Republican Party. And they've been there for a while. But now, you know, these parties, Norm, like these left and right fucking Democrat and Republican definitions shift over time for a reason. I don't know if you're 70 something years old now. Maybe you should fucking be able to see this and not fucking accuse Tucker Carlson of being an anti-Semite or whatever the fuck you're doing here. But yes, so the other thing is, it's a right-wing cause now because the right is actually waking up and going, oh, we're supposed to be pro-life. We should be consistent on that and not support the murder of women and children, as we're out here telling people that abortion is bad. So kudos to them for finally finding some consistency on that issue, which is, you know, what Candace Owens' journey was, I think. But Norm says something that really stuck with me on this, about this. He says there were anti-Semites who didn't like Israel and they used Palestine, you know, to get Israel. And he completely misses the point that it's about the United States and a foreign country and our resources. It's not about racism. It's not about, and that's in retrospect now, when I look back at all these like AM radio conservatives who were called, branded as, you know, white supremacist racists, they're America first. Even you look into history, they called America first people KKK right wingers
because they were against American foreign adventurism. And that was a bridge too far for the elites who launder money that way and have been, as we can see, are doing it to this day through Ukraine, now Iran. It's some kind of weird money laundering op. But that's why our weapons are 20 times more expensive than Russia and China's, because there's a bunch of cunts in the mix making a bunch of money off of it. And Finkelstein, surprisingly, despite having years on me, doesn't see this pattern of the parties being a complete ruse, just a fucking skin mask that the elites wear to manipulate the public as they switch back and forth. Israel was a left-wing cause. Now, obviously, it's changed, he says. Okay, wake the fuck up, Norman. You basically explained to us just there how the parties shift back and forth to hang on to power, to manipulate you, and you don't even realize it. You don't even realize what I just said, that the right and left are complete bullshit at this point. And then he goes on to like, the podcasts, there's no left podcasts. It's like, bro, that's retarded. There's 1,000. George Galloway is a podcast that's left. Fucking Glenn Greenwald is largely pretty left. I mean, now people call him right wing because he's actually consistent on free speech and things like of that nature. Fucking there's 1,000. Katie Halper, you've been on Katie Halper's show. Brianna Joy Gray, those are real left. Then you have the fake Democrat left shows that are garbage anyway. But even Joe Rogan, I mean, Joe Rogan's had a lot of he had Bernie Sanders. He's had a lot of left leaning people. And so it's what this comes down to is just Norm's kind of warped view of what you can tell, at the beginning of this, he romanticizes what the left is. And so he can sit here and go oh, the right, this must be a conspiracy that they suddenly care about Palestine. No, they're just being consistent in their values now. And that happens to offend the, popular wing of the party. But let's let this finish. We're almost done here.
The closest thing to a left person in the podcast world, it's only one. It's Mehdi Hassan. And
Mehdi Hassan.
He's not a person of the left by any stretch of the imagination.
See how dumb this is? Mehdi Hassan is the only leftist left in the podcast space. So that's where it just gets absolutely ridiculous. And I would love to hear Finkelstein's take on Ukraine. I don't know what it is, but I'm sure it's not good based on that alone. He's clearly one of those brunch liberals, Putin's bad, and we have to help the good people of Ukraine by sending Nazis a bunch of weapons. And him and Bernie Sanders should do a podcast together, a shaky voice Jewish guy show or something. But anyway, maybe I'm wrong and Finkelstein has a good take on that. I doubt it. But I just want to show you, this is dangerous. Jesus. Then of course the pile on here from dipshits like Nathan J. Robinson, of course, now we all got to be critical of the right because we need to stay in our fucking silos, in our little left and right silos. And I want to ask Nathan and Norm, is this right wing, this criticism of, because the UN is technically a left-wing organization. So is this criticism of the UN kind of green lighting the events of the last several years in the Middle East? Is this right wing? I would ask Norman that. Is this racism? Because it's who it is really, when you think about it, this is racist and right wing kind of protest by the quote unquote left. Let's watch a little bit of this real quick. This is Russell Dobular from Due Dissidence had this in my feed. And I probably said this as well. The kids are all right, but students from the Colin Powell School at City College of New York heckled Linda Thomas Greenfield, former U.S. ambassador to the UN during the Biden administration. Linda Greenfield, you're...
Let me thank you for reminding me of what was probably one of the most difficult periods of my career, not just here in New York, but all across the world.
So the kids are all right. The kids are all right. And is that left wing? That got me thinking, in the right versus left dynamic, those kids are right wingers because Linda Greenfield, LTG, is a left wing black, woman of color who was put in there to keep the fucking foot on the gas for a certain Middle Eastern policy, and those kids were not having it. So are they right wingers, Norman? Is that unacceptable for them? And this got me thinking, why is the UN left wing? So I typed into Google, is the UN left wing? And this is what I got. The United Nations is not explicitly left wing. Rather, it's fundamentally a liberal internationalist institution. While its foundational focus on global cooperation, human rights, environmentalism, and wealth redistribution often aligns it with left-leaning politics, its structure represents the diverse, often competing ideologies of its 193 member states. So you see, that makes sense. Climate change. The UN and its agencies treat climate change as a global priority, which often aligns with progressive and left-wing policy goals. Socialist and economic equality. The UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Sustainable Development Goals heavily emphasize public health, labor, multilateralism, organization. So these are all the things that it professes to be, but clearly does not live up to. And that's why people are yelling at Linda Thomas Greenfield at a graduation speech, because she did not live up to the left-wing ideals of the UN, and that explains why the UN appears left-wing. And I bring all this up only to illustrate the point that left versus right is a ridiculous construct, especially when, making allies to oppose the mass murder of women and children. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Moving on here. Anti-Semitism in our greatest ally, our greatest dark alley. So there was a huge backlash against Mamdani recently. And this is not to say that he's socialist savior of America, that a lot of people make him out to be or anything. But he's clearly upsetting the right people. And, in my opinion, that's a good thing to do. So there's this recent post, and this is from Blakely here, about how Mamdani will not attend the not attending our pro blank parade is basically another Holocaust lunatic Zionist. So the disgusting pro-Israel lobbyist Dove Heckled launches a vicious smear campaign against NYC Mayor Zoran Mamdani. He outrageously blames the mayor for hate crimes simply because Mamdani took a principled stand against the Zionist regime's actions.
Now as the group Americans Against Anti-Semitism.
Yeah, let's listen to this.
I said on the campaign trail that I wouldn't be attending the parade, and I've made my views on the Israeli government abundantly clear. And I also said on that same campaign that I would have a responsibility as the mayor of the city to ensure the safety and security of each and every New Yorker.
His absence comes amid a skyrocketing number of anti-Semitic incidents and attacks in the city and across the country. Former New York State Assemblyman
Anti-Semitism. Okay, quick sidebar. Blakely here, in response to these people saying she looked trans or something, posted this picture of herself like in a bra and panties this week, and it like kind of blew my mind. I was like, whoa, Blakely is fucking fire. I was like, damn, girl. I'm feeling a certain type of way when I see that photo. And it was hot. It was like she's in like these little fucking lace panties and shit. And like I was just like, she's like the mullet, like angry leftist chick. So you never see her. And like, so kudos to her too. I almost saved the photo to show here, but then I thought, nah, that like she's very clearly like she's a smart woman.
So her brand is more like political talk, not like, hey, look at my tits, which I appreciate. But bad bitch, gotta say it. Anyway, the outrage this week was that Mamdani won't attend this parade, and so the people that are those people are really upset by that. And those guys are constantly doing shit like this, so it's hard to take them seriously. Watch this. This is great. This is one of the recent things that our good friends have tried to pull. This is a woman. Whenever I see this stuff right off the bat, my first instinct is like, oh, what, secret agent is running this campaign? The Muslim woman who made the Nazi salute and harassed a Jewish woman while shouting, Merry Christmas, brother, Merry Christmas, brother, and wishing her cancer, has been arrested by the Beverly Hills Police Department. Should she be deported? We already exposed this. She is blank pretending to be Muslim. This is what we usually see with these types of like, oh, look, I got a racism done to me ops. And time and time again, we see this. It's very rare that these end up being legitimate claims of, racism, but it is funny to watch these people try to flip the narrative that, when you remember Ben Shapiro, like facts don't care about your feelings. Now all of a sudden feelings don't care about your facts. We're going to, nerf the world so these people don't have to hear protests against their favorite foreign country. Now, this gets a little deep here because this is a meme that's been going around, and I kind of want to backtrack this here. And what this guy says, or this person, Matthew Peretti, what he says here, I think kind of it makes a good point, I think. And that point is, what kind of mindset do you have to be in to, take a thing like this seriously, or even just kind of rational? He says the mind that produces this specific fantasy is one that wants to kill kids. And I can't really argue with that. Is don't shoot the kid, and the guy says, "Are you retarded?" And the kid has a bazooka. And it's like, okay, there is another solution. You could just take the bazooka. But also, why does the kid have a bazooka? Is another good question to ask yourself. Now, this is the mindset that a lot of these people have, and it's been bashed into their skulls to the point where some of them I don't think are bad people. I think they've just had this kind of like warped mentality forced into their skulls throughout their lives. And to give you some context here, I retweeted, the reason I kind of know the history of this, I retweeted this post a while back from Vinny Paz. And it asked the question, don't shoot the kid. And he's like, are you anti-Semitic? Because he's got the emblem of our greatest ally. And so the guy, with the other meme, this one right here, is kind of responding to that. Obviously he kind of photoshopped the kid with the bazooka in there to make this, to justify this behavior. And again, Vinny Paz, legendary rapper from Jedi Mind Tricks, is the one who tweeted this out. But it kind of makes the point that, this is the level that these people are going to justify this behavior. And I've said it many times, but the whole argument that we're making in doing these kind of wars in the first place is that we're above this behavior. They're quote unquote animals, and we're like civilized people who, these people use human shields, or they kill people, or they do this, they kill people without trials and stuff. And then we go and do that and completely forfeit the high ground we said we had to do it in the first place. And it makes no sense. But this is where it's all heading. It's heading to this. And it's already starting. How did you end up in jail? this is the timeline that we're on. And look at Europe; they're arresting people left and right. I heard someone talking about Germany on a podcast, and they were kind of talking about how Germany is the most censored country because it's been occupied since World War II. So there's been kind of this, imperial control being exerted over Germany for a long time. So it's kind of like almost like a staging ground for this type of behavior that's starting to spread throughout Europe and starting to catch on here in the United States. You had Anonymous. I mean, they were advocating for Europe, but advocating for treason laws and putting people in jail who support Russia by reporting true things that the U.S. regime doesn't like about what's going on. And then you have guys like Norman Finkelstein kind of perpetuating this kind of shit by claiming there's, some kind of a secret anti-Semitism from the right. And he's helping this kind of shit perpetuate, this censorship regime for criticism of Israel because it's anti-Semitism. So this is the type of thing, again, where Tucker Carlson is outdoing the left. And this is a recent interview that he did. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but just a brief clip of it with this man who was a surgeon who was in the Gaza Strip recently.
They discovered the dead bodies of 300 civilians in the hospital. Some patients, some staff, many of them handcuffed with their hands behind their back, many of them with bullet wounds on the head, including this friend of mine. So there are multiple examples of people, of healthcare staff who've been killed, healthcare staff who've been abducted. I think the latest figure is nearly 500 healthcare workers have been abducted, illegally detained without charge. Many of them
by the Israeli military?
By the Israeli military into the Israeli prison system. Multiple examples of them being tortured. This has all been documented by a group called Healthcare Workers Watch. You can Google it. They produced a document called "The Killing and Detention of Gazan Healthcare Workers," and there are multiple examples of people being tortured to death.
Tortured to death?
Absolutely. So an iconic orthopedic surgeon who I didn't know well, but I had met, and in fact I had coffee with him in May 2023. He was tortured to death, and in fact a Sky television investigative journalist interviewed fellow detainees. And
so this is what the quote unquote right wing is doing, and Norm Finkelstein somehow has a problem with that. That it baffles my mind, and I just want to show you where this ends because I think this is a good, accurate depiction of the current state of U.S. politics. Yes, ladies and gentlemen. One more time for you. Now, before we continue on, I want to share something with you that is of the utmost importance, because this is not, again, and has never been about the Jews. This is not a Jew thing. And I want to show you my proof and my receipts for that. This idea that anti-Zionist is somehow anti-Semitic is fucking ridiculous. And I see a lot of otherwise intelligent people pushing it. Looking at you, Bridget Fedesi, a good example of someone who keeps coming out and saying, you're a racist anti-Semite if you say anti-Zionism, because just say you hate Jews. That's what it really means. And then last week I played a clip of Monica Crowley calling herself a Christian Zionist, which completely destroys the idea that it's a Jewish thing. But I wanted to end this segment by showing you this, because aside from all the stuff I just said, the most hardcore opposition to what our greatest ally is doing is from Jewish people. And this is from Max Blumenthal, a recent report. New Jewish Voter Resource Center poll finds nearly half of young American Jews are functionally anti-Zionist. A recent Washington Post poll found that 61% of Jewish adults said our greatest ally had committed war crimes against the Palestinians in Gaza, while 39% said it was guilty of the G word. So Max Blumenthal himself is Jewish. Aaron Mate himself is Jewish. a lot of the people that I watch and care about, Katie Halper, Jewish, a good portion of the opposition to our greatest ally is Jewish. So this idea that it's like some racial thing, and it's like, oh, that's what the Zionists want you to believe so they can continue to use racism as a shield from criticism, which is what they're doing and what they've been doing for years until recently. They've gotten away with it. And I mean, I wanted to look up Medea Benjamin, because Medea Benjamin, I believe that she is Jewish, if I remember correctly. Maybe not. Whatever the case, she is one of the loudest anti-war activists out there. Yeah, she's of Jewish descent, so maybe she might not be like practicing Jewish, but according to Wikipedia, here, let me show you. According to Wikipedia right here, Medea Benjamin, born Susan, daughter of Alvin and Rose Benjamin, grew up in Freeport, New York, is of Jewish descent. So I show you this again just to make the point clear that, this ain't some anti-Jewish thing. This is an anti-Zionist thing. And anyone who's trying to tell you otherwise is a scumbag. So I had a couple of other segments I wanted to do, but we're running short on time, and we're already almost 2.5 hours in. So I want to close with this piece about George Floyd, because I feel like this issue has been misconceived largely by a lot of people, and it's intentionally misreported and misunderstood, I think, by political pundits for a lot of different reasons. But at the end of the day, to me, it breaks down to one simple fact, and that is the state does not get to be judge, jury, and executioner. I don't care if George Floyd was on drugs. I don't care if, him and the cop knew each other. He was murdered by police in the street. He could have been picked up off the ground, put into a car, and taken away to the station. Instead, a policeman stood on his neck. We have this on video for like 7 minutes and choked the guy to death. And people are like, oh, he died of a drug overdose. Blah, blah, blah. No, he died of a guy fucking choking him to death. There's video of this, you dumb retards. So I bring this up because I feel the same way in the death of Ashley Babbitt from January 6th, there's a much, more, I guess, defensible argument that she deserved to be shot by the cops because she was charging the barrier or whatever. And that's the liberal cults. Hey, it's okay for the state to be judge, jury, and executioner case. Ashley Babbitt on January 6th, she was a fucking veteran, Air Force veteran, who was shot and killed by Capitol Police, at a protest. And again, you can argue that what she was doing was aggressive, whatever. Did deadly force need to be used? No, she didn't have a gun. You could have maced her. You could have cuffed her. You could have tapped her with a billy club, whatever. You didn't have to murder this woman. And the same goes for George Floyd, and the whole he was on drug shit is cope. So I want to show you what triggered me on this whole issue, because it started with this post. If you think George Floyd is a hero, you're retarded. Now, that sentiment I actually agree with, but also the amount of people that think he was a hero is slim to none. And this is what I tried to kind of illustrate in my response here. Nobody thinks he's a hero, just that he deserved a fair trial and not to be murdered by the state. And then, of course, this one that was followed up, no one really saw, but I said, libs, yay, a cop killed Ashley Babbitt. I support the state killing anyone it deems a criminal with no trial. Trump bad. Conservatives, yay, a cop killed George Floyd. I support the state killing anyone it deems a criminal with no trial. Obama bad. This is cult-like behavior, and if you have real principles, you will stand on those. And it's that simple. I don't think George Floyd is a hero. And the point isn't that he's a hero. That's not the point at all. The point is that he didn't deserve to be murdered by the police. That's the point. He didn't deserve to be choked out. And if that was your friend or your brother or your child that was choked to death and murdered by the police, you would be upset too. And that's the reality. It doesn't matter what your politics are. And the same thing with remember that Daniel Penny guy who murdered that guy on the subway, the homeless guy? It's like, again, I don't think that what that guy did was right or anything, but also you don't get to just murder someone, detain them, spray them, whatever. Don't just choke them to death or snap their neck or whatever. This guy was a tough guy, whatever. Maybe he didn't do it intentionally. I don't know. That's a different subject altogether because that guy wasn't a cop. So in that case, it's a little more of like a vigilante thing where you can debate either way. But in the case of police officers, that is not a precedent anyone values whatsoever. Like, it shouldn't be normalized for cops to kill people. That way you could get killed at a random traffic stop, which a lot of black people do, and I'm sure a lot of white people do too. It's not even necessarily a race thing. It's proportionally when you look at the amount of, but we won't get into that. Again, my point is consistency. That's what I value. And I want to close this piece out, which I wanted to open it with this, but I want to close this piece out by reminding everyone about the time that David Guetta ended racism. I used to be racist as fuck until David Guetta performed on that skyscraper. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I don't know how much of this I can play with the sound on, but here you go. This is just absolute internet gold. 6 years ago, David Guetta ended racism.
So this record is in honor of George Floyd. And I really hope we can see more unity and more peace when already things are so difficult. So, shout out to his family.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and mute that because I don't want to get a copyright strike, but you get the idea. It's good. It was very nice of David Guetta to end racism like that. But I just want to close out here by reminding you that Nick Fuentes is a Fed because he's out here accusing Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and Dan Bilzerian of taking money from Qatar now, which is just, it's pretty wild how fast these things have changed over the past several months, how fast things have come unraveled. And I had two more stories I wanted to do today, but I can't go for 3 hours by myself. This isn't a podcast where I have someone to volley to. I'm getting short of breath. I got shit to do. But I thank you very much for sticking around with me and listening to me on my soapbox today. All you guys, specifically you, Truth. Yeah, that's in response, I assume, to the Norm Finkelstein thing. Sorry, I'm gonna before we log off, just go through some of these comments. Oh, okay. See, I'm not a gun guy. I have no idea. It's a rocket launcher. Bazooka to me is a rocket launcher. Forgive me for my ignorance on firearms. I'm definitely. It's not baffling partisans want to be in control of the opposite. That's the truth. As we saw, why are we? Yeah, those are left-wing journalists. He's talking about podcasters. There's no left-wing podcast anyway. Yes, and Medea Benjamin, thank you. I'm glad we're on the same page there. And again, all that stuff. There was a lot of very Jewish critical, I guess you could say, content today. Not Jewish critical, but Israel critical, greatest ally critical, and none of it has a racist bent to it. A lot of my favorite people, a lot of my heroes are Jewish. I'm not even, like I said, I wouldn't know about half of this shit if it weren't for Jews like Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mate. So this idea that
this whole thing is anti-Semitism. It's very, I didn't even use this once today.
You're an anti-Semite.
It's very Douglas Murray.
You're an anti-Semite.
Anyway, thank you guys again. I appreciate y'all for listening to me rant for 2.5 hours. I got love for you. I've been trying to hit up more regularly video clips, and it's very interesting what YouTube does. You know, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but it's these motherfuckers all have a video. Like, I've been posting some of these because these AI generated shorts, right? That the fucking StreamYard will generate. So it's not a lot of work for me because I got a day job. You know, I'm a one-man band here. So I've been throwing up some of these shorts because some of them are pretty good. And if I edit them just right, you know, it's a good little short little message. Those will start to take off and they'll get to like 500 and they'll just cut right at 500 views. And that's it. And then it'll be like 501. Like it's just so clear that they just cut the spread of it. You know what I mean? Like, it's starting to get picked up in the algorithm and they're like, nope, 500, stop right there. So every little bit of the point of me, you know, yakking on my conspiracy theories right here, allegedly that YouTube is allegedly throttling content that they deem inappropriate or, you know, anti-government or whatever. The reason I rant about that is because that's how much I value you motherfuckers who actually watch the show and like and subscribe and fucking share or whatever you're doing. You know, thank you so much for fucking keeping me afloat here, making me feel like I have an actual audience. I got fucking special Truth for commenting and bringing some feedback each week. And hopefully I'm bringing stuff to the table that you guys are interested to hear about, or maybe shining a light on something that, you know, you didn't know about or didn't hear about during the week. So hopefully it's doing something of value to you, because it's doing a lot of value for me to get this shit off my chest and just have a place to spill my guts. So once again, thank you guys for being there for me. And I think we'll take you out today with something. What do we got that's funny today? Let me see here. I got a folder. I'm going to go into the folder. I'm just going to yak for a minute. You know what? I'm going to take you out with my Necro short today. This is my original Necro diss track. And you know what? God bless. God bless fucking Satan bless Necro. Necro is a fucking cool dude. And, you know, someone in the comments told me that he heard this and he fucking dug it. And I appreciate that. It's like roast comedy. You know, it is what it is. But, and Necro is a G. Like, that guy's been a legit underground dude for a long time. So he's very pro-Israel, though. And I thought this was funny. So I'm going to take you out with this. Thank you again for listening to me. And we'll be back here next week on Sunday, 2:30. And keep it real out there, guys. Peace.
I'm like if Nosferatu was a pudgy elf. Israel has a right to defend itself. I stab your face with a rusty ice pick, then I'll turn around and suck Netanyahu's dick. All my songs sound the same, it's pathetic. And Dave Smith is anti-Semitic. Got so drunk last night it's kind of blurry, but I think I got sodomized by Douglas Murray. I say a lot of tough shit that sounds scary, but deep down inside I'm really just a fairy. And some people might label me a demon, but my mouth and ass are full of Israeli semen. Cause I'm a Zionist fuckboy, Netanyahu's fuck toy. I'm a Zionist fuckboy, yeah.